Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL graduates. Welcome back to another video. So, the international break finally over. Game week 8 is just around the corner. There's lots to play for in this season of FPL. Very much looking forward to it. A couple of transfer plans in the works as well for both of us. So, without further ado, let's look into Josh's team.
Yes, getting into my team then. So we're off the back of a tiny-ish red arrow at this stage of the season. I think it was like a couple of 100k, down to 2.1 million. So yeah, not ideal, but I did captain Bruno Fernandes. So if he was to blank and Haaland was to return, then it was almost guaranteed at that point. So yeah, not too bad of an outcome, to be honest. You know, when Bruno blanked on the Saturday, I was sort of fearing the worst, to be honest, going into the Sunday. But yeah, the one goal from Haaland's not too bad. So yeah, going into this week then, we've got one free transfer. I will plan on probably using it. I'll discuss that as we go through the team. In goal, obviously, we've got David Raya. He's my Arsenal defensive coverage, which looks unbelievable value for money when you consider that Gabriel is 6.3, 6.4 million, and I picked up David Raya for 5.5, and he's getting the same 4 points. We'll take that all day. I think a clean sheet against Fulham is fairly likely with just the amount of injuries that Fulham have in the attack. Joe Rodon is starting for us this week with Burnley away. He's been fairly aggressive from set pieces. He's obviously scored a couple of weeks ago. I think he hit the post last week as well. So, yeah, really good goal threat from him. He's also fairly consistent for DEFCONs. I think it's just under 10 per 90 at the moment. So, yeah, obviously would like to be over 10 this week when he faces Burnley away, which I think is a decent fixture for it for DEFCON possibility. Obviously, both teams are going to need to win that game if obviously they're going to stay in the Premier League. So should be a good one there. Van Dijk is next. Obviously, Liverpool defence is just not ideal at the moment. He is starting against United just because I think there's probably a chance of DEFCONs at the worst case, if not a clean sheet. It's very hard to predict, even as a United fan, what sort of performance they're going to put out at the moment. So, yeah, it's a tough one. I could maybe look at starting Richards. I think Tossing's probably still a question mark as it stands with the fact that Fafana, there's Chalobah, there's Badiashile, there's so many options at the moment. That's becoming a little bit more clustered than maybe what it was before Tossing got injured. Senesi is the last defender. Obviously, didn't hit DEFCON for the first time last game week, but Crystal Palace away is usually a very good fixture for DEFCONs. So I imagine he probably picks them up there. I've gone with him over Richards just because I own Semenyo. So obviously, you know, that's going to be a bit of a fixture clash in the team. What's the thoughts on that defence, Ben? And obviously, maybe a bit more on Van Dijk.
Yeah, I mean the Van Dijk one's an interesting one. Look, you could make a free transfer this week, and take out Van Dijk. But for me, look, I agree that you don't know what you're going to get with Manchester United, and if you knew you were going to get a terrible Manchester United, you'd start him every day of the week. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think Rodon, I agree. I think that's a DEFCON game waiting to happen. I anticipate lots of turnovers, lots of tackles, lots of DEFCON, essentially from the centre backs of both teams. Similarly, see that with the Palace game as well. So of course Richards and Senesi a difficult one. I see them both getting DEFCON again. So it's a difficult one to sort of decide there. And then Raya in goal as that Arsenal coverage, sensible to have it. So yeah, all in all, fairly strong defence, and I expect sort of like a bit of a floor of maybe 4 points from your defenders this week.
Yeah, we'll take that. And then going into the midfield then. So I made the free transfer last week. Sort of forced, really, because Matoma obviously had that knock. And I wanted some Brighton coverage just because our fixtures are fairly good over the long term. Obviously, I've used my wild card already, so having players with good long term fixtures is great. So we went to Yankuba Minte. Obviously, he did blank last game week, but going against his former club this week, I think is still a really good option for the foreseeable. Just super involved all the time, which is great, and yeah, it looks great on the eye, which is always nice to watch someone in FPL who looks like they're going to score at least. Semenyo's next, obviously off the back of that 18-pointer. Just someone who, if you don't have in your team yet, just get him in. Like, he's one of those guys that you could safely say you could probably have him until game week 38 at the moment. Like, the consistency from Bournemouth is just unbelievable. I know his returns were late in that game. He didn't have a return before the 78th minute, so yeah, maybe fortunate for 18 points, but he's returning every week, no matter whether that's DEFCONs, whether it's assists, whether it's goals, whether it's penalties. You know, he's got it all, and the routes to points is something that I personally am sort of making a priority in my teams at the moment. Bruno Fernandes is next. Obviously, he's sort of one of those kings of routes to points. Been fairly, not, I guess disappointed is the right word, but he obviously was close to returning against Sunderland at home. He hit the post. He was one off DEFCON, then two off DEFCON. So we were close to a haul. Liverpool away this week is an interesting one. I think it's almost a dead cert for a DEFCON, so the floor is there. He does provide an opportunity, though, for me to move to Bukayo Saka this week, which at the moment I'm fairly likely to do. Like Ben mentioned with Van Dijk, it could be Van Dijk to, say, Gabriel or Timber, or it could be Fernandes to Saka. I basically need to decide what triple up of Arsenal I want to go, whether I want to play it safe with two defensive assets or maybe go slightly more differential with Saka and obviously Victor Gyökeres, who's in my attack. So haven't made a confirmed decision at the moment. I'd say I'm probably 60-40 Saka at the moment. I think Fernandes is still a fine asset to hold, and if you keep him for the long term, that's probably the best route for him because you can't really predict when he's going to get those goals. But yeah, he obviously offers that route straight to Saka, which is at the moment looking like a bit of a no-brainer with the fact that he's on the penalties. And then Lucas Paquetá is in the midfield. It's between him and Njai for that final midfield spot. He's got the better fixture this week with it being Brentford at home. Obviously, under Nuno, I expect them to have some few better performances. Him playing in that 10 is a lot better for owners as well. He's more likely to get DEFCONs. He was quite close to it last week. And then also obviously got the penalty threat as well as his open goal play threat as well. So yeah, edging him over Njai at the moment, although I wouldn't be surprised if Njai comes away from the Etihad with some DEFCON. He's obviously on penalties as well, which was confirmed at the weekend. So yeah, fairly tough decision in that midfield this week. It wouldn't shock me if I get some points off the bench or on the bench with someone blanking in the midfield this week. What's the thoughts in the midfield, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, it's some tough benching decisions really in that midfield because there's a couple of tough decisions, maybe of players that, are pretty 50-50 on whether you think you're going to get a return. It's probably between Minter, Paqueta, and then Dye that you're having that issue because Minter, Newcastle have a very good defence and they've been pretty solid. Paqueta has been inconsistent, I think, to say the least, in terms of returns, and then Jai has been pretty good this season, but has one of the toughest fixtures that you could ask for. So yeah, I think with this decision, it'd probably go down the wire for you, and I probably wouldn't drop the three that you have up top. So it's going to be between those three, and then yeah, like you said, I think the floor is fairly high for Fernandes. I would be really tempted to go with Bukayo Saka though, just with the way he's been playing recently has been very, very good. He looks to be back at the level that we see from Bukayo Saka, his best level. So I'd be very tempted to do that. And Semenyo, like I said, can be a mainstay for the season.
Okay, then, so going into the forwards, we've got Victor Gyökeres, as I mentioned. He was my choice of Arsenal attacker for quite a few weeks now. I've had him for like 3 weeks and he's blanked in all of them. So maybe jumped on a little bit too early in hindsight. But yeah, I'd still back him to get some goals in the fixture run coming up as it stands. So yeah, it could be a double up of him and Saka. Could be the double defence, as I say. But Gyökeres won't be leaving my team at the moment. João Pedro is next, another guy who I'm not really too concerned about with the fixtures that Chelsea have upcoming. Leading the line for them, it's a matter of time before he returns. And if I'm honest, I'm hoping that people sell him because his ownership is really high at the moment. So yeah, give me all those gains, please. And then Erling Haaland has the armband. Everton at home this week. We discussed it in the Game Week Guide video. He's just a set and forget captaincy at the moment. Obviously, no Salah, who's maybe the other potential option this week. It's just Haaland for me, with the potential chance that Michael Keane could be out, and as well as Jared Branthwaite, there's even more reason to go with Erling Haaland. It's not his best start to a Premier League season, but it has been pretty good. So yeah, I'll be backing the guy who's in form, unlike what I did last week. So hopefully he will score me a couple of goals this week. Ben, what's the thoughts on the forward line?
Yeah, I think hopefully we can get a couple of goals from Haaland. It's going to be the template captain for this week, so it's almost a decision you don't have to think about. And then Gyökeres, again, decent option despite sort of being frustrating to own for owners at times. I do think the potential is definitely there. And like you said, João Pedro, is blown hot and cold, a bit like Gyökeres, but with the fixtures coming up, there's no way that you'd sort of remove him now. So yeah, for me, a very strong front line. Okay, so moving on into my team, we're off the back of another green arrow up to 1.1 million. So a nice one from 1.4 last week. So I can't complain too much about that. It's been a good couple of weeks for me, FPL wise. Made some really good moves with my team, and it puts me in a strong position because I've got two free transfers as well to attack this game week potentially. So starting off in goal, we've got the Bravka with Leeds at home. Now that could be Sanchez. Again, it's another 50-50 decision with my keepers. At the moment, sticking with Dubravka because I think there's potential for a few more saves, and Forest under Ange could be sort of a little bit more attacking in terms of threat than Leeds. Again, I think it's quite a 50-50 decision. I don't think, going with one or the other is the wrong decision or the right decision there. But I'm going all in really on that Burnley defence potentially this week with Esteve in there as well. Like we said previously, I think there's going to be a good amount of DEFCON potential in this fixture. So looking forward to seeing that. Gabriel in as well. Of course, brought him in a couple of weeks ago, and he's been fantastic for me since. So happy to keep him in for that game against Fulham. For myself, I'm in a similar position to Josh, where I've got two Arsenal players, and I'll need to make a decision within the next couple of weeks on whether I double up in the defence or in the attack. And then to round off the defence, we've got Pedro Porro. Spurs defensively have been decent. Porro's been slightly underwhelming, albeit the jammy assist last week did make up for it. So we'll just have to wait and see there. Josh, what's the thoughts then on the defence? We've obviously got Sanchez, Van der Ven, and Richards on the bench, so a strong bench for this week at the moment.
Yeah, indeed, it's looking pretty good. Tough one between Sanchez and Dubravka. Like you say, it's very 50-50. I probably would just hedge it the Dubravka way, I think, just about. Despite obviously Chelsea being a better defence, I think the fixture's obviously a little better, despite Ange's Forest being pretty terrible so far. But yeah, overall, I think the defence is solid. Porro's obviously still got the attacking threat, which is great. And obviously, Gabriel is the best route to points for that Arsenal defence.
Okay, so moving on into the midfield, and of course, just like Josh Semenyo's in there to start with. I mean, like Josh said, mainstay in the team, so not too much to say about him. Bruno Fernandes in there as well. I mean, there's been temptation to sell him, but nothing really screams out to me in terms of options to go with as an alternative at the moment. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. I think the floor, like Josh said, is 4 points, so can't complain about that. Brought in Saka as well a couple of weeks ago, and he returned last week. So again, really happy to own him going into this week. Like we said in the game week guide, there's potential captaincy option, but for me, I'll go with the main man himself that we'll see up top. We've got Reinders in there as well, and again, there's thoughts on potentially transferring out, but I don't think I can do it at the moment with City's fixture run. He can return, once every 3 or 4 games, and I'll be fairly content with that. So not too worried about that. And then to round off the midfield, we do have Morgan Rogers. Now, with Spurs are away, and they've got City and Liverpool coming up in the next three as well. There is a temptation for me to transfer out Morgan Rogers potentially this week with one of my free transfers. In terms of options to go to, again, not too much in terms of options available. Ismail Assar is probably the one that sticks out most to me, just given he's returned in back-to-back game weeks since coming back from injury with a 7 and 11 pointer. So there's a potential transfer plan formulating there. Josh, what's the thoughts on the midfield and then the potential of maybe making a free transfer there?
Yeah, I think the majority of the midfield is solid. Obviously, Semenyo, Fernandez, Saka, even Ryan is fine for now. Obviously, Ryan has been a bit unlucky not to get a few more returns than what he's had so far this season. I think Rodgers is an interesting one. Villa have picked up their form a little bit, so I wouldn't say they were as bad as what they started this season. Obviously, Rodgers as well has been fairly consistent, and to be honest, over the international break, he's looked pretty good as well. Like you say, in that midfield park, it's like you're waiting for someone to come out and emerge as a real go-to option. I think Sar's definitely in that sort of category. It's just whether you want to move to him with Palace's fixtures getting a bit more tougher. So, yeah, I don't mind the move at all. I just think that you could potentially postpone it maybe one more week and then save that decision for next week.
Okay, so moving on to the strike force then, and we've got Erling Haaland as the captain, of course. Like I said, absolute no no-brainer for me this week, alongside João Pedro. So a fairly strong front two, which I'm fairly happy with. Of course, with two free transfers in hand and a fairly strong bench, there's consideration for the bench boost this week potentially. I'm like 10% likely to hit that chip this week, so fairly unlikely. But just given two free transfers, the opportunity to play it, just given that we've still got bench boost, free hit, and wildcard to use in basically a quarter of a season. It does give maybe a little bit of food for thought. Josh, that's the overall team. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think obviously the striking options are great. I think for the next couple of game weeks, João Pedro's a solid option. I think bench boost is interesting. Obviously, I'm not sure how much you got in the bank, but if you could get GUI up to even someone like, I don't know, Thiago, maybe even Calvert Lewin, if you were to go against that Burnley defense, something like that, I think I'd be tempted to, just because it's just such a difficult chip to play in terms of like trying to get it down to a good week. It's almost like when you see a decent week, maybe it's a chance to sort of just play it there and then. So yeah, I think that's definitely worth considering this week. Like you say, the Rodgers move is not necessarily a must do this week. Tottenham have had some defensive frailties this season, so yeah, if you can get GUI up, I think I wouldn't mind the thought of bench boosting what you've got around him. Okay then, so that wraps up our Game Week 8 team reveals. Apologies for my cold, it'll be gone by next game week, I'm sure. So hopefully, just like my rank, it can improve on next week. Let us know if you've got any questions in the comments, and we'll make sure to get them answered before the Saturday lunchtime deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
We'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.